Jai Gurudev, good morning. So today's satsang is from Srimad Bhagavatam, Canto 7, Chapter 8, Verse 10. Dhasyun pura sanna vijitya lumpato manyanta eka svajita disho dasha jitatmano gyasya samasya dehinam sado svamoha prabhava kuta pare. In former times, there were many fools like you who did not conquer the 6 enemies that steal away the wealth of the body. These fools were very proud, thinking, I have conquered all enemies in all the 10 directions. But if a person is victorious over the 6 enemies and is equipoised toward all living entities, for him there are no enemies. Enemies are merely imagined by one in ignorance. So, a fool is somebody who has not conquered the 6 enemies, but has instead conquered all enemies in 10 directions. 10 directions include up and down, by the way. That's how you get to 10. The 6 enemies are, in chapter 15, verse 7 of the Bhagavad Gita, Krishna explains that a fragment of himself incarnates as the Jivatma, and it acquires 5 senses and the mind, which is the 6th, he says. So these are your 6 enemies when uncontrolled. He says one who has not conquered. So unconquered, those are enemies. Conquered, they are friends. It's not that they are inherently enemies as we know, right? So we're talking about 5 senses in the mind, and that is the issue here. And he says, therefore, one who has conquered that has no enemies because he understands he's equipoised towards all beings. So now we come to this word equipoised. And this is again the same thing he says in Bhagavad Gita. In chapter 2, verse 48, Krishna says that samatmam yoga. So yoga is defined as this equipoised stance, this vision of equanimity towards, in fact, in that verse he mentions success and failure. But it's all dualities. Friend, enemy, success, failure, hot, cold. It's a constant topic in the Bhagavad Gita. So we have 2 things that we need to do here. We need to conquer the 6 enemies, and we need to attain a vision of equanimity towards this material world. And how to do that? And the answer is yoga. Now the question is which yoga, how, but the answer is yoga. This is the answer given by Krishna. This is in fact the very same answer that Patanjali gives in his Yoga Sutras. Yoga is designed, I'm talking about now Patanjali's yoga, is designed to still the fluctuations of your mind, chitta vritti nirodha as we know, but to still it means to stop your externalized activity, revert the gaze, and rest in your true nature. To rest in your true nature. Your true nature is that which we have to discover. Guruji says so many times, who are you? Discover who you are. But yoga doesn't end when you discover who you are. Because who you are, as you discover it, you discover that there is somewhere from where you come from. So the who you are has a source in of itself, and so even when you discover who you are, you want to discover where you come from. In substance, it's the same. And so many people think, okay, as I have discovered the substance, there is nothing more, because everywhere I look, there is more of the same substance, Brahman. But we understand that beyond that substance, there is identity, there is personality, and that being the case, we want to understand the person. And so yoga goes from a process of self-mastery, self-transcendence in a sense, to a process of connection, relationship. And relationship is the key word here. A lot of people do yoga, but they do it for everything but relationship. Okay? Krishna in the Bhagavad Gita, he does something quite unique. Because he says that a yoga has been lost. He says this in the beginning of chapter 4, and I'm here to re-establish it. But it's not every yoga that had been lost, because by the time chapter 4 comes, Arjuna is already debating with him, already conversing with him about other known types of yoga, for example, renunciation. Krishna is telling him to act, and Arjuna is saying, but shouldn't I run away from this? Shouldn't I step away from all this? That type of yoga in which you renounce, a yoga of inaction, was known. It was not lost. It was common at that time. You're wandering the forest and you'll meet sages that have renounced the world and they're sitting there in meditation. This happened throughout the Mahabharata. This happened throughout the Ramayana. When Ram is in exile, he finds yogis in the forest meditating. During the Mahabharata, when the Pandavas are in exile, they find yogis in the forest meditating. Renouncing the world to go and meditate was a known thing. That's yoga. At that time, that was what was understood as yoga. But Krishna says, a yoga has been lost and I'm here to reestablish it. What was the yoga that he was teaching that Arjuna did not seem to understand because he had no knowledge of it? It was the yoga of action. It's not run away from the world and renounce it. It's do something in the world, but do it the right way. Its first step was karma yoga. The fact that you can still engage in all of your duties but be considered a yogi was not known. And so he teaches this first step. No, perform your duty, perform it selflessly. As the dialogue develops and as his own nature starts to become more and more revealed to Arjuna, that same karma yoga evolves into bhakti yoga. Because actually, in principle, they are the same. The only difference is that instead of renouncing the fruit of your action in karma yoga, simply being detached, you take that fruit and you offer it to God. Mentally, it's the same. I'm doing something not for my selfish motivations, not for myself. I'm doing it for others, or I'm doing it at the very least in a detached form. And there's only one redirection necessary. If you believe there to be no God with which you want to have a relationship, if you believe yourself to be the highest thing in existence, then you perform action in detachment because you want to detach yourself from this so that you can meet yourself in truth. But if you understand that there is a Supreme Lord beyond yourself, then you take everything and you give it to Him, because that's what we do in relationship. In relationship, we're always orientating our lives towards pleasing the person or being in connection with the person to whom we want that relationship. Always, at all times. It doesn't matter what the context is. And you have to see how much Arjuna is confused by this. And so as we are presenting this, the Bhagavatam verse speaks of a fool. A fool is somebody who does not control his six enemies being the five senses in the mind. How does that link to this idea of bhakti yoga? Use everything to offer it to God for relationship. It's very simple. If you don't have control over your senses in your mind, you may have all the good intentions in the world. When push comes to shove and you actually have to do something, you will never offer it to God. You will never do it primarily thinking about God, because you have no control over your thinking patterns. You have no control over your motivations. You have no control over your action. The thought will arise, triggered by an external stimulus. It will compel you into action before you've even stopped to think, what am I doing? And by the time you sit and reflect at the end of your day doing some nice self-analysis, you realize, why did I make those choices today? And you won't have the answer because you never stopped to reflect and to contemplate before taking action, because you were unable to stop and do that because you have no control over yourself. And then somebody might argue, what you're describing seems like I have to become a much slower person because I have to stop and think before I do everything. I have to contemplate and reflect what would be the selfless version of what I'm about to do. And like that, I can't get anything done, and I have to be efficient, I have to be productive, I have to be, etc. But this is where we misunderstand that there is a transitionary period where you coach yourself, you reprogram yourself to become selfless. But once that reprogramming has happened, the very same way that the things would stimulate you to behave selfishly, things will naturally stimulate you to behave selflessly. And it becomes just as instant as the selfish behavior was. You just have to perform the transformation. And that is yoga. You do the sadhana to change, to reprogram and rewire yourself. It rewires your way of thinking, it consequently rewires your way of behaving. It rewires your vision towards the world. The vision that is described here is a vision of equanimity. And I'm going to quote exactly the two verses. In 48, Krishna says towards success and failure. That's the first one I want to elaborate on. And the Bhagavatam says towards friends and enemies. Equanimity towards these two. Now you ask any reasonable person, why should I be equal towards success and failure? Surely I want to succeed. Surely everybody wants to succeed. Why should I be equal towards success and failure? And the answer is very simple, because those things don't belong to you. They do not belong to you. And so if you foolishly remain attached to the idea of success when you have no control over whether you're going to achieve it or not, you are setting yourself up at least 50% of the time for failure. At least 50% of the time you're setting yourself up to be disappointed and frustrated and angry. And that's not a good thing to do. That's not a good way to orientate your life. Then someone might argue with me, how do you know I don't have success in my hands? If I make the effort, if I upskill myself, of course I can guarantee success. Except you can't. It's never been that way. Guruji has described infinite number of times. All you have is your effort, is your intention. Whether it leads to success or failure is not in your hands. Because we have a karma that has been predefined, and we have a Lord that can override that karma, but that is still His will. And so He will decide whether to give you that success or failure according to what's best for you. And sometimes it's not success. Sometimes failure is your success. And sometimes success is your failure. And if you are left to decide which is which at every given moment, it's guaranteed to fail. In the true sense of the word. Not the failure that leads to success. Real failure. What is real failure? Real failure is a delay, an unnecessary delay of your connection with God. That's failure. Success is anything that brings you closer to that relationship with God. And sometimes that means that you need to go through something that externally appears to be difficult, but it brings you closer to Him faster. That's great success. That's a success that you've been yearning for lifetimes. And so it's not so simple as to think success and failure are things that I should be chasing or avoiding. Attraction and aversion, we have to become indifferent and equipoised towards attractions and aversions. Krishna says that a person who's steady in his wisdom neither chases that which he is attracted to, nor avoids that which he is averse to. Why? Because both of those things are created by a desire for pleasure and a distaste for pain. Everything that I feel pleasure from, I am naturally attracted to and therefore chase. Everything that brings me some form of pain, I am naturally averse to and therefore run away from. But as I just described to you, sometimes the painful experience is the thing which brings you the most success. And sometimes the pleasurable experience is the thing that brings you the most suffering. That's why Krishna says, don't chase either, because you don't know what you're chasing in truth. You think you're chasing pleasure, but it might harm you. You think you're running from pain, but that might be the thing you needed the most. Therefore, don't chase or run. Accept what comes. If you surrender to the Lord, He will provide to you the experience that is necessary. And that's a far better way to live. Then comes the friends and enemies. Surely you know friends, surely you know enemies. You're not eager to hang out with enemies, and you are eager to spend time with friends. Everybody lives this way. We orientate our lives this way. So how should I now become equanimous towards them? How does that work, practically speaking? And this is a lesson I've learned from Guruji. It's a bitter lesson sometimes because of how human I am, how conditioned I am in my thinking. One of the things Guruji always says to me, and he has a nice version of it and a less nice version of it. Here's the nice version of it. You know, Revati, all humans are the same in as much as they have an uncontrolled mind, and therefore I cannot fully trust anyone. And so I keep everyone at an equal distance. Because I cannot ever bring anyone close until they have controlled their mind. Because if that doesn't happen, they're capable of anything at any moment. That's the truth. Okay? The less nice version is, I don't care about anyone. Why don't you care about anyone? Because the versions of them that exist right now, that's not who they really are. So all this, the yous that exist right now, I don't care about that. Useless, cheap, low quality, low value. Guruji, low value, but we're doing seva and we're doing sadhana and we're doing this, we're doing that, and still you have not controlled your mind. Therefore, for now, not interested. Right? Now, it's a provocative statement. He's not really saying I'm not interested, because if he was not interested, we wouldn't even be here. Right? Clearly, he is interested, but he's interested in investing. It's an investment into a you that you don't yet know and that he's very well aware of. And he wants you to get to know it just as he knows it. It's an investment. So I'm invested in the long-term you. The current you, I'm not that interested in. The current you I don't trust. The current you I don't even particularly like sometimes. But I am very invested in the future you. And it's our job to be equally invested in that future version of myself so that we're on the same page. And if we're on the same page, now we have a relationship. Not about the current version of me and him, but we are in a relationship with Guruji about who we're about to become. And so he's working towards creating that person, and my behaviors and choices are going to be fully aligned with that because I'm equally invested in becoming that future version of myself. And that's the version of me that does not run away from the difficult experiences and doesn't chase the pleasurable ones, because I understand that he has a project for me and I want to participate in that project. I don't want to work against it. If Guruji is trying to create in me a change and I'm trying to hold on to the old version of me, what is the point of the relationship? They cancel each other out. It's not enough to say I have a guru, I have a sadhana, and therefore I'm evolving and I'm growing. There needs to be coherence in your entire lifestyle. I'm currently teaching a class on yogic philosophy every Sunday, and one of the questions that rose is yoga a practice or is it a lifestyle? And the truth is, it's a lifestyle. When you see Patanjali's Ashtanga, his 8 limbs that he proposes, a lot of them have nothing to do with your exact yoga practice. It's not when you're sitting with a straight back, focusing on the mantra, which by the way is the primary form of yoga that he recommends, just straight back and focus on the mantra. Anything else is a slight evolution of that. If that is going on, and that alone is enough, it would be brilliant, but it's not. He talks about the do's and the don'ts, the things that you should do, yamas and niyamas, things that you should do in your life, things that you should avoid. That's beyond your practice. That's a lifestyle choice. That's what you do all day long, every day. So your life becomes yoga. Your life becomes a process of getting to my true self and connecting to the source of that true self. And that's not something I do from 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. or from 9 p.m. to 10 p.m. or on the weekends. It doesn't work that way. And so it has to be an all-encompassing mentality shift that accepts that the biggest and most productive thing I can do for my betterment is the word coherence. I have to become coherent with the intentions of my guru, coherent with the will of God, coherent with reality. And that is what it means to live outside of Maya. To live in Maya is to think I control my destiny. To live in Maya thinks success is in my hands. To live in Maya is to think I am going to achieve this, this, and that by this date because I decided so. That is all Maya. But to understand my nature, to understand the nature of all of you, of everybody else, to understand the nature of this world, to understand the method of how I can transition from living this way to living another way, situated in my true self, in relationship with my source, relationship. For that to happen, I need to step out of Maya. And for that, coherence, alignment. The wills have to come together. This was something Guruji said to me 3 days ago. 3 days ago we were talking, and he was talking about some of the more difficult moments that we've experienced in the last years as a mission, as management, trying to make things develop and grow. And he thinks sometimes one of the difficulties I experience with you, the bigger you, is the lack of alignment of the will. I want something, but you insist on something else. And this insistence creates a constant clash. And that clash is not necessarily just felt about that particular topic. It becomes a general clash because there isn't alignment. There isn't that coherence between the two parties, between him and the devotees, the one being served and the one serving. So you can be a great servant, but if you're not serving what the master actually wanted you to serve him on, then despite being a great servant, there's still a mismatch and there's still an error in what the outcome is, because it's like somebody says, hey, could you come to my house and clean my kitchen, please? I really need you to. And you go there and you clean their bathrooms. They'll say, well, it's still nice what you did. It's still obviously selfless and there's service involved, and you might have cleaned them to the point that they're spotless. Amazing service. And yet, that's not what I asked for. It's not actually what I needed, right? And that needs to be understood. Therefore, he did like this with his hands and said, that needs to happen. The wills need to come together. And as you can see in this, one is on top and one is underneath. In chapter 4, verse 34 of the Gita, Krishna says that you approach your spiritual master with first quality, submission. You submit your will. Because if you compete the wills, if it's a competition of the will, he won't beat you down into submission, because that goes against your will. He will not do that. He will remain in this clash, in this conflict, and which means you essentially go nowhere, because he is not entering into your space. You understand? None of his wisdom is penetrating into your sphere of being. If you try to lord it over him, you will fail. You can try. It will be an interesting watch. And so the submission principle is, as any teacher does to any student does to a teacher, as any child does to a parent, it's, I recognize your higher wisdom. You please cover me with your wisdom. Cover me with your understanding, your vision, and from that I will imbibe the knowledge. I will imbibe whatever you have to give to me. And like that, we can proceed together. Right? And that's what has to happen. And that is the solution to the problem mapped out here by the Bhagavatam. Conquer your 6 enemies. That's the real journey you have to go on. And the Bhagavatam explains that beyond that journey, connection to Bhagavan awaits you. But the first step is that, and the best process for that is yoga. Jnana yoga, karma yoga, bhakti yoga. Jai Gurudev.